very nice introduction and a very nice welcome. Thank you. I want to introduce my wife of 55 years. Today. I hear we have quite a few people, and it looks like quite a few. And we had an earlier event over in Idaho, and it looks like we may have a few more here tonight. But it is great, and I am just so impressed with what's going on in the country. I know what's going on in Washington. That's depressing. So what's happening in the country is not depressing because there are a lot of people like you out there, and you're just finding out where they are, and they're getting very excited. There's a group of people who have known there's been problems, but have felt disenfranchised and haven't been involved. They knew exactly what we should have been doing a long time ago. They sort of dropped out, but they knew and still know exactly what America is supposed to be all about. And I believe they're coming back in the fold and excited. And there's another group coming together with that remnant, and that's called the young people. We should be excited. Ideas have consequences. You have to have ideas. You can't change anything. Because the type of government a country gets is not an accident. You say, oh no, just so they messed up when they got there. No, they got there, and most of them stayed there. They thought it was going to go on forever. They thought we could live beyond our means, borrow money and print money and do the things that they've been doing, never realizing there was an end point. And though there's been a lot of us working in the vineyards and trying to get the attention of the people, the real attention has occurred just recently, and it's in the last 4 or 5 years, the discovery that this country is bankrupt, and we just can't continue this spending. We have to quit the spending. The financial crisis that hit in 2007 and 2008 was an eye-opener. People know that we can't afford it anymore. But it's also been an eye-opener for what we've been doing overseas. Most people now are starting to realize that when countries grow too big and overextend themselves around the world, which countries have done for thousands of years, they do that and they think they're invincible and they go too far. I think the American people are waking up and saying, why are we wasting our resources, our financial resources, our lives, our young people overseas doing things that don't serve our interests? And this is what they discovered. There is when a country goes to war in a more proper manner. We, up until World War II, we made declarations of war, we fought them, we got them over, and then we came home. But here we are, we're involved in undeclared wars, unwinnable wars, and unnecessary wars. And we have been there for over 10 years. World War II, fighting the Japanese and the Germans in less than 4 years. So that war was won. We've been there 11 years in Afghanistan, and the people now, especially just recently, the Lieutenant Colonel came out and said, it's bad news over there. They're fibbing to you. And some people call it lying to us about the American people and what's happening. He says, we're not accomplishing anything. And the evidence is coming clear, and the statement made in the introduction about who do the military support ought to tell this country, let's wake up. It's time to end these wars. We can't afford them. There are no benefit to us. And that means we need to bring our troops. But we need representative government that actually takes their oath of office seriously. This is the number one reason why we're in the trouble that we are today. We've had too many people go to Washington, they take the oath of office, they have no remorse, they don't think they've done anything wrong, They just think, well, the Constitution is a pliable document. We have to modernize it, and we vote any way we want. But that is the reason we got into this mess. If we got into this mess by not having constitutions in Washington, the way we get out of this mess is send only individuals to Washington that will obey the Constitution. Going to war without declaration of war, but what about the money issue? Where did they get this authority to say that a group of individuals in a secret room can decide how much money is going to be and who gets it? That system doesn't work. It serves the best interest of the special interest. It's called the Federal Reserve System. It needs to be exposed and then removed. On this. This was one of the reasons there was a constitutional convention, because they had to run away inflation. The continental currency was destroyed. So they wanted to take care of this problem. They said only gold and silver could be legal tender. There could not be emitting of bills of credit, which is paper money, and no authority was given for a central bank. And what have we done? We've just totally ignored it. We've ignored it for 100 years. But 100 years is long enough. The experiment has been there, and they've been running roughshod over it, especially since 1971, when the last link to gold was severed. So I would say 100 years is long enough. We've learned our lesson. Let's go back to the Constitution and have sound. Why we should have that Constitution is obviously a very good reason. Another is economically. The Federal Reserve System is responsible for the business cycle. They inflate the currency, they distort the currency, they create the bubbles which serve the special interest, and then when the bubbles burst, guess what? They go and bail out the people who are suffering from the bubbles being burst. So it also is a moral issue, because if you or I counterfeited the currency, we'd all go to jail. But we allow our government through the Federal Reserve to counterfeit the money. That's what they're doing. They're debasing the currency. They're destroying the value of the money. So there's the moral issue. One other issue, the reason why it's so dangerous to have a monetary system like this, is it allows governments to grow in a seductive manner. If we had a government that always paid its bill, and something Jefferson argued with, he didn't want, not only did he not want to print the money, he didn't want to borrow the money either. But think of what it would be like if we had to pay the bills as we went along. The American people would rebel, because they would, just realize how much it was costing and how much harm they are doing. So I one time thought if I could get a bill passed to solve that problem, this would be very beneficial. So my suggestion, with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, was let's get rid of the withholding tax. Let's make everybody write a check to the U.S. government every month, and boy, we have a revolution. The income tax, that's another little item we want to take care of. We want to get rid of it. We embarked 100 years ago into the welfare and warfare state, and since they knew direct taxation to pay the bills wouldn't be very popular, then they started borrowing money to a large degree, and then, of course, inventing the Federal Reserve so they could just print the money. And a country can get away with that a while. It delays the payment. You don't notice it. Some people suffer. Some of the people suffer. They don't realize that other people benefit. So it's very, very destructive. And it seems to work for a while when the country is wealthy. But we're not wealthy anymore. We've destroyed the productivity of this country. We have undermined the foundation of our currency and our economic system. So therefore, we're at a point now where all they do is print the money, and we had special benefits because after the Bretton Woods broke down in 1971, we were able to be the printer of the world, print the dollar, but it was still accepted as if it were gold. And that was an illusion. It's been an illusion, but the illusion is coming to an end because it will be rejected. Economic law, moral law demands that this will be rejected, and we're in the middle of this. We're in the midst of a worldwide crisis in currencies and financial problems that we have today. And yet, our government, through our Federal Reserve, currently are very much involved with the economic crisis of Europe because our banks have invested in their banks. They're in on this together. The banks in Europe bought up all this bad debt from Spain and from Greece and Italy, and they're bankrupt. So, well, we can't allow the banks to go bankrupt, too big to fail. So they can promise that our dollars will bail them out. This is wrong. But when, if we allow them to happen, and of course if this continues, it'll be eventually the rejection of the dollar. And the total rejection of the currency can come rather rapidly, and it's a financial crisis that is uncontrollable, which can lead to a political crisis. This is why it's good to have a plan and improvise a plan where we work our way out of it. This is why I'm saying cut $1 trillion, and back off and shrink the size. We already see, Greece just the other day accepted this plan for the 15th time on what to do. And of course, it was to cut them back on some of the jobs and some of the welfare. But there are riots in the streets because they believe, as many people in this country believe, they're entitled to it. They believe entitlements are right. Entitlements aren't right. You have a right to your life. You have a right to your liberty. You should have a right to keep the fruits of your labor, but you're not entitled to take your neighbor's property through the politicians. Government to grow in this seductive manner, borrowing and printing money. When government gets bigger, it only gets bigger by shrinking our liberties. And now we're in a crisis period because our personal liberties are under systematic attack. These last 10 years have been very devastating. Even to the point now, recent law actually has repealed some of the provisions of the Magna Carta. That's a few years old, and yet we're repealing that, like allowing the military to arrest American citizens and held without a trial indefinitely. Our liberties are being threatened, and therefore we have to take a stand, and that's where I'm encouraged. There's a lot more people today wanting to take a stand, and they can and they will. But we have to realize that we need to understand what the principles of liberty is all about. I believe we have to know that the government can't give us our liberty. The most they can do is to protect our liberties. But our liberties, our life and our liberties come from our Creator, or in a natural way. It's a gift given to us, and we should own our life, and we should own the fruits of our labor. But if we assume that God is going to do all the work, the effort to do this will require a lot of effort. It requires a lot of political efforts, obviously, but the political effort actually is secondary to the intellectual efforts. Ideas have consequences. I'm absolutely convinced of this, and I think that's what's happening in the country. People are coming to the obvious conclusion, the correct conclusion, that the age of Keynesianism and inflationism and deficit financing, the age is over. We have to live it. If we recognize that, then we can start doing the right things. Being in denial is one thing, and we've been in denial. We believed for too long that we can continue to do this. When the country was super wealthy, and we were at one time, we're not now. We were the wealthiest country in the world, and we had the largest middle class. And today, our middle class is shrinking. It's shrinking in size, and it's shrinking in wealth. And the wealth, of course, is gravitating to the few. Now, the few, you know, that's a mixed bag on challenging those few who have a lot of money. In a free society, there will always be rich people. And if a person is rich or a company is rich or if somebody sells us a product that we like, and they make a lot of profit because we make them profitable, and we buy their goods, we like their product, and they make a lot of money, and they get no benefits from the government, we shouldn't frown on that. If a company gets very, very big because they get special deals and contracts and they're part of the military-industrial complex because they're part of the banking system and they get bailed out by the government, that's a different story. We should deny them the special benefits and deny them. Is very healthy that is happening is the failure of this redistribution of wealth for the benefit of the poor. Libertarians and conservatives have done a lousy job over the years, especially when we were so wealthy. It was hard to say, oh no, we can't do that. Well, this will lead to some problems. And by just forcibly trying to help certain groups. But the evidence is here now. You know, governments have nothing, they produce nothing, they only can steal from one group and give to another. So there is no such thing as free medical care. There's no such thing as free education. There's no such thing as free housing. And yet, you people just don't care about people. So we have had in the past at least lost a humanitarian argument. Because if you weren't caring, not to take from one group to another, so you don't care about poor people. But what happens is it becomes so clearly obvious that this system of government is no better than socialism, that it destroys wealth and makes more people poor. This is what's happening to us.
Yep.
There's nothing clearer than the housing bubble that we had. Housing program was set up, easy credit, affirmative action programs, Community Reinvestment Act, tell banks what they had to do, make sure poor people had their houses. But then some people ended up with a house that they really couldn't afford. And some people made a lot of money off the deal. The brokers and the mortgage people and the gamblers with the derivatives and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they made billions of dollars. And then, of course, when the bubble burst, as was predictable, then they say, well, you have to bail us out. We're too big to bail. And what happened? They got bailed out. They're back in business again. But what happened to the middle class? The middle class people lost their jobs and they lost their houses. It's proof that this program of government intervention and planning doesn't work, and therefore we have to restore our understanding of how the market works, understand the confidence that free people can take care of more people than all the government programs put together. Government will never be perfect, and the closer the government is to our home, the better it is. And right now, we fight and try to keep the federal government smaller and keep more government locally. But we also have to be very much aware of international governments coming. There is so much of that. They're talking about a substitute for the current monetary system, a new currency under the United Nations and the IMF. And of course, I see our national security hindered by belonging to those groups. It's never helped by belonging to the United Nations and going to war under a UN resolution under NATO, not even conferring with the Congress is the way they do this. So local government is really what we want, and that's what the founders gave us. They gave us a republic. They wanted the states to be as independent as possible. Does that mean the states would run things perfectly? No, but it would be a lot easier changing one state than when you have to change, the whole country at one time or the whole world at one time. But once we have accepted this notion that it's okay for this because government's always going to help us, and we let this money gravitate to Washington, whether it's income taxes and users fees and highway fees and everything else. The money goes to Washington, but it never gets distributed fairly. The bureaucrats get control. It's a political system, and then when they finally send some of our money back to it, guess what you get? A ton of regulations. You're not even able to spend your own money because it isn't your own money, because we sacrifice the independence of the state by allowing our governments to do this. And the same way with individuals, if we think that we can benefit from a government medical program, oh yeah, we'll give up to that, and then they're going to argue over mandatory health programs on whether the insurance company must give birth control pills or not give birth control. That is so far removed from what a free society is all about. In a free society, you wouldn't have those kind of silly debates, about who's going to distribute birth control pills. We have lost our confidence in property rights. The government really owns the property. They own us when they invented the income tax. The income tax is based on the assumption, even if it's a low percentage, the assumption is the government owns all your income, and the government will permit you to keep a certain percentage under certain conditions. And we jump through all the hoops. So it's the principle of the government ownership, of our income. But once we succumb to the regulatory agencies of the federal government, as well as many local governments too, that our land isn't our land anymore. Our land is we have the liability of the land, we pay the rent, but if anything goes wrong, it's our fault. But if we want to use it, how many permits do you have to have? It's just so out of control. We have a federal register that continues to grow. People talk about it a little bit, but it always grows by the tens or thousands of pages. I don't know if any one individual could possibly understand what's in the federal register. But there's one promise that I'll make. I will not expand the size of the federal register. I will shrink the size of it. Besides, the executive branch doesn't have constitutional authority to write regulations. Those are laws, and they're very, very complex. And it's the Congress's fault. It's our fault for allowing our members of Congress to default and allow the courts and the executive branch to write laws. Only the Congress is supposed to write laws. The president should not be allowed to make use of what they call the signing statement. Oh, I'll sign this bill, but about 2/3 of it I don't like, so I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So if he signs a statement like a line item veto, I have no intention on having line item vetoes or signing these statements. Also, a president has no authority to write executive orders. We've heard this president say, well, they're not moving fast enough along on some of these environmental issues. I'll just write an executive order. This is not a system. And yes, the complacency is getting smaller. People are waking up. I think we can say we've had enough of this.
Yeah.
In an age that we live in, and especially this last 12 years, especially since 9/11. 9/11 was a disastrous day for us.
False
Everybody
flag.
understands that. But it was also an opening for people who wanted to do things they've been trying to do for a long time. For instance, the whole issue of Iraq was talked about and planned many, many years before 9/11. They saw things as an opportunity.
Truth.
The first speech I gave on Iraq was in 1998, because that is when they said, our policy in the United States now is to have regime change. So I was speaking out then, but after 9/11, they concentrated too much on going into countries that had nothing to do with 9/11, occupying these countries while ignoring the people that I voted for to go after was the Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden. But it took us 10 years to find him, and yet we went and occupied all these countries. We lost 8,500 Americans, 40-some thousand of severe injuries, hundreds of thousands of veterans today who are looking for help for post-traumatic stress syndrome and brain injuries, and the facilities aren't available. And we don't even know why we're there. This is why the military support my candidacy, because they know that the wars over there are not going away. A young man asked me earlier today, he says, well, when would you be able to bring the troops home? I said, well, I've been asked that question before. My answer is, as soon as I can send the ships. All kinds of excuses, but I say, we just marched in, we can just march home. We're not at war. We've been in police actions. It's not called war anymore. It's called kinetic military action. So as long as it's kinetic military action, we don't have to worry too much about it. So, but we need, of course, an overhaul in foreign policy. They'd like to paint us as not caring about the world. But the founders were very explicit about foreign policy. They wanted a foreign policy of friendship and trade with people. Haven't we been a lot better off with the Chinese and the Vietnamese now that we've been trading with them rather than killing each other? I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it expanded, and that decade was terrible. It took another 10 years to get out of there. And I mean, no Americans want to be defeated and have to lose a war. But we lost the war. We came home. It was a loss. And we have to learn our lessons from this. And when McNamara wrote his memoirs, McNamara orchestrated the whole war. But he was somewhat subdued before he died. He wrote his memoir. And one of the reporters asked him, he said, does that mean you want to apologize? And he said something rather unique. He said, what good is an apology? He says, the only thing that counts is that you recognize your mistakes and change your policy. That is what we have to do. The French and the Americans were in Vietnam for a long, long time. A lot of people died. Probably, of course, we lost 60,000, and there were probably 1 million Vietnamese that died. And just think, now the fact that we were there was to stop a domino effect of communism. And we lose, we left, and there was no domino effect. It looks like the domino happens to be the spread of capitalism to the Far East. I mean, the Chinese are not our bankers. We're going to them. We played in Vietnam. We travel back and forth. We invest over there. They come over here. Just think how much more was achieved in peace than was achieved in war. And the founders talked about. Others want us to be around the world because of this mystical thought that it's American exceptionalism. I think America is an exceptional nation. But this has been hanging around for a long time, that we have an exceptional system. We have the perfect political system, and therefore we have this moral, evangelical obligation to spread our perfect system to the world and teach them to be good Democrats and have elections and all this. course, we go over there, we invade them, we fight wars, we set up a government, they have elections, and they elect the wrong people, so we have to throw them out. We've been doing that for a long time, but the exceptionalism of our country, we can restore that. That means we have to have a free and prosperous country. We have to, once again, really protect our civil liberties, and we have to have a more peaceful approach to the world. If we set a good example and we're free and prosperous, you know, it just may be that somebody else might say, well, that is a good example. Maybe they would want to emulate us. Wouldn't that be so much better than us trying to force it down their throat? You know, after 9/11, of course, the one plan was that they had the opportunity to pass an act that they've been trying to pass for quite a few years. Most people know it as the Patriot Act. When I quizzed one of my fellow members on why he was voting for it, he said, how can I vote against the Patriot Act under these circumstances a couple of weeks after 9/11? He said, I could never explain that to my people back home. I said, but that's your job. Go home and explain it to them. Sure is, if you look at a bill written in Congress and you see a title to it, make the immediate assumption it's going to do exactly the opposite. Been more honest and said this is repeal the Fourth Amendment bill, they wouldn't have been able to vote for it, and these things wouldn't get passed. But that is essentially what it's done. This has introduced the whole notions about how they treat us at the airport. Part of the Patriot Act attitude. No reasons for search warrants, no reason for probable cause, just because, oh, we're going to make you safe. They're working on the assumption that we will always be cowed into believing that we're only going to be safe if we turn all the responsibility over to the government and give up our civil liberties. It's wrong. You never have to sacrifice liberty. The president, approximately 1 year ago, sent somebody over to the Senate to testify and announced a new policy. This new policy was that even if you're an American citizen, the president has the authority to assassinate him. Without charges and without a trial, because he's a bad person. Well, I would say he's a suspect, and maybe he's a bad person, but didn't at all likely get a trial. Israel gave him a trial, and he was prosecuted and was killed. Timothy McVeigh was given a trial. The bad people are supposed to be given trials so that we're always protected no matter what charges are made against us. So this is a very